We've tried to implement that kind of vision in some of the commissions that we've published in recent years. Anthony Costello from University College London, now working at WHO, worked on our first climate change commission, in which their conclusion was that climate change is the biggest global health threat of the 21st century. They just published another climate commission, another 30,000 words, 3 or 4 years in the making, and the conclusion was summarized like this: climate change is the greatest global health opportunity in the 21st century. When we published the first commission, there was this general feeling of pessimism and depression, and it didn't get much coverage. When we published this commission with the sense of opportunity and hope, it got an enormous amount of coverage. That told us something very interesting, that if you present the challenges we face in a more optimistic, positive, hopeful way, you really can mobilize society and the public and political actors in a way that presenting things in a rather depressive way cannot. And science gives us the narrative to present that vision. Of course, when you think about climate change, the direct and indirect effects of climate change, whether there be storms, drought, flood, heat waves, and the indirect effects on water, air, land use, ecological change, all then feed into health. And the obverse is true too, that if we address climate change effectively, that will have co-benefits for health in terms of more active transport, changes in our diet, energy use. So there's a dividend for health by addressing climate change. But I don't want to talk about climate change only, because climate change is just one small part of the challenge. Remember that circular figure I showed of Johan Rockström? Climate change was just one part of the threats to that safe operating space our species exists in. What's the lesson of thinking about these threats? The lesson is that I think we've got it wrong, very, very, very badly wrong. Because what we're doing is we're thinking about the threats that face us as if they are external, that the dangers we face are in the physical systems around us, whether they are carbon dioxide, acidified oceans, the biosphere being destroyed, diseases, or the growth of populations. That is not the threat. The threat instead lies in human systems. The threat lies with us. This is the Anthropocene era. The health of our societies, how good our economic systems are in creating equity and equality, our political systems, our ability to create social stability and systems for peaceful dialogue. So if we're going to address the conditions that give us hope to achieve this prize, we have to look at how we organize ourselves to create a sustainable future and a resilient future. Now, a couple of years ago, we tried to summarize this in the notion of what we called planetary health, going beyond public health, going beyond global health, thinking with a larger vision about this thing we call planetary health. At that time, we talked about the need for an urgent transformation in our values and practices based on the recognition of our interdependence and the interconnectedness of the risks we face. We are all in this together. We are very grateful to the Rockefeller Foundation for their investment in a commission to look at this question of planetary health. And Tony Capon was a commissioner on that work, and I think there's a copy of the commission on your chairs. We were led by Andy Haynes. That's the tiny little figure at the end of that table there. There we are in the Rockefeller Foundation building in New York City. And the basic argument that we were trying to make is summarized on this flip chart, and I've already mentioned some aspects of it. The great divergence during the past 250 years, that natural systems are being destroyed, but our human systems are actually at the center of the problems that we are trying to address. We looked at the state of the planet today, rapidly rising populations, especially in some of the poorest countries of the world, but at the same time declining poverty, rising life expectancy, dramatic increases in energy use and water use, and also increases in the way we're using domestic land. declines in tropical forests, shortages of water, acidified oceans, as I've mentioned already, dramatic temperature changes, and catastrophic loss of biodiversity, which is now well established in its links to human health. And when you look at the footprint of the human species on the planet, you can see very simply how such large parts of the planet have very high environmental impacts, footprints, because of our activity. And this is the background to thinking about the challenge of planetary health. And again, work done by Sam Myers at Harvard reinforces the work by Safa Motashariai. In other words, when you look at degradation of ecological systems and population health, it's the poor who are going to suffer more first. We, the wealthy elites, are relatively immunized from harm until 300, 400, 500 years down the line, it's too late and the carrying capacity of our planet extinguishes. We need to ask ourselves the question, and this is where in health we have to extend the vision of what health is, whether our economic models for our society are right or not. In the Commission on Planetary Health, we talk about the notion of a circular economy, moving from the traditional economy where we make, use, and dispose, a consumption-driven economy, to one where we're not trying to preserve everything exactly as it is, but we're trying to build in a restorative function to our economy. And that's expressed in this notion of a circular model. And of course, that is very well tied into economics. Amartya Sen and Sudhir Anand, now over a decade ago, wrote a very influential paper in World Development, where they asked this question: what is the right economic model in a society for sustainability? If you listen to our political leaders today, they understandably talk about the need for maximum economic growth. Maximum economic growth will deliver more resources that we can distribute to our population, and that will protect us from future financial or other shocks. But what Sudhir Anand and Amartya Sen showed so well was that maximum economic growth may well not be sustainable economic growth. And if we really want to create a sustainable, resilient society, maybe we need to shift our economic model away from maximizing growth to something a little short of that. Now, that's a difficult political challenge. How does a politician go out there and say, I want growth, but not maximum growth? We need to go out and make the case that sustainability is going to require trade-offs, but those trade-offs will deliver benefits for our children and our children's children, and that's the investment we make in our generation to the future. But that's a political conversation that has yet to be grasped. What this means is, when you sum all of this evidence together, is that we have two visions for our future. The preconditions for our future are very much shaped by Australia. I know was somewhat protected from this, but for large parts of the world, from economic shocks. Corruption, incompetence, insecurity, degradation, poverty, and conflict were preconditions with economic decline for what has been in so many countries an economic crisis. And here's the choices we can take. The first choice is that we fail to act. And if we fail to diagnose the problem, we will lead to an unstable situation where conflict increases. When I say privatization, I mean that we lose public goods. We lose the concept of the importance of a shared commons that you and I need to be stewards of. Escalating risk of disease, social decline, and depopulation, which will then evolve into true collapse. Advanced breakdown of our societies, fracture, civil war, social chaos, famine, and fragmentation. And, as I've said, our museums are full of examples of societies, whether they be Greek, Roman, Assyrian, Mesopotamian, Mayan, civilizations, all of which at a particular moment chose the wrong path. But the alternative is golden. If we diagnose the challenge we face, we can move into a phase of resilience and adaptation, where we create the right vision for our future, build the political support for that vision, bring people together in a solidarity for that vision, and enter a phase of transformation. And we reconstitute our society, we reconstruct our society to recover from this threat, build a new set of beliefs, a new cultural memory based on that vision. Abbas Al-Zain, who's at the School of Civil Engineering at the University of Sydney, put this very well in the final paper on a series on the Arab world we published in 2014. We argue, he said, that the current discourse on health, population, and development has largely failed to convey a sense of urgency when the survival of whole communities is at stake. That's certainly true in the Arab world, but it's also true in many other parts of the world as well. The survival of our societies, our communities, is at stake. So, put simply, planetary health is the health of human civilization and the state of the natural systems on which it depends. And what I would invite us to do is to think about health not just at the individual level as health professionals, not just at the population level as public health professionals, not even at the national level as politicians, but actually to think of health in terms of our civilization, and whether we've created the right political, economic, and social systems to deliver sustainable futures for those civilizations. And let me pay tribute to one particular Australian who I think was there 50 years before anything I've said in the last 20 or 30 minutes, and that's Stephen Boyden, who in this book, The Biology of Civilization, Understanding Human Culture as a Force in Nature, wrote this: while the main threats to humankind today are the consequence of human aptitude for culture, our only hope for overcoming them lies in this aptitude. And there's the riddle, in a sense, that we have to somehow address, the puzzle we have to solve about our own existence as a species on this planet. And Stephen can't be here this evening, but we've had a very interesting correspondence. He's very generous about the work of the Planetary Health Commission, but seriously, he was there before, along with Macfarlane Burnet. This raises a question about science. I won't ask you if anybody knows who this is, but does anybody know who this is? It's an unfair question. This is the first editor of a scientific journal. Henry Oldenburg was the editor of Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society, 1665. So this year is the 350th anniversary of the first scientific journal which is still in publication. The question, what does all this mean for us as stewards of the scientific literature? The Lancet, as Brendan very kindly said, has tried over the last decade or so to use science as an instrument to bring some of these issues to greater public attention. Our idea is simply that if you bring the best scientists in the world together around a table with the very best evidence, and you synthesize that into a story about a particular predicament, that provides the platform for advocacy and for potentially policy and even political change. Organized science can provide a strong platform for policy change and advocacy. Sometimes it feels uncomfortable for scientists to do that. I can well remember the very first child survival series that we did was in 2003. And Bob Black, who was then dean at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, Bob was very nervous about this. This is politics. We don't want to get into it. We're scientists. Bob now is on the front lines of advocacy for children based upon the very best science. In fact, it's an abdication of our responsibility as scientists if we don't bring evidence to decision makers, to policy makers. That, in a sense, is the covenant we've made with the public who support the investment in science. That we should think about the communication of science, the implementation of evidence as part of our role as scientists in society. Over the past 4 years, I've had the privilege of co-chairing a small group that reports to Ban Ki-moon called the Independent Expert Review Group on Women's and Children's Health. And the idea behind this group is to monitor progress on Millennium Development Goals 4 and 5, on child and maternal mortality. And the model we've used is that science can be an instrument to hold all of us in society accountable for the promises and commitments we make through monitoring the progress we make on those promises and commitments, providing a forum to review the progress we've made in a participatory, democratic way, and finally to provide options for action. I'm going to end now with this particular slide. During the summer, I spent a week in Jerusalem. And if you go to the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, you'll see this painting. And it's a painting that gives us a very salutary lesson about the story I've just told. In the late 19th century, in 1894 in fact, Gustav Klimt was commissioned by the University of Vienna to paint 3 pieces that would be displayed within the university to celebrate the contribution of academia to public life. One was on philosophy, one was on jurisprudence, and one was on medicine. This is the one on medicine, or it's a sketch of the one on medicine, because unfortunately the original was destroyed at the end of the Second World War. What did he do? It's a beautiful painting. The goddess of the daughter of the goddess, the daughter of the god of health, Hygeia, the daughter of Asclepius, is shown in the foreground here. So health, medicine, is put right at the center of his vision. Fantastic. That's exactly what the University of Vienna wanted. But then the scholars at the university looked a bit more closely at the picture and started to get worried. Because what had Klimt also painted? On the right-hand side of the picture, you can see a series of bodies which represents the river of life. And on top of those bodies are 2 figures. One in red, a rather pale, sallow figure, which represents disease. And to the right of that figure, a skeleton dressed in black representing death, the great threats to that river of life. And to the left-hand side of the picture is a naked woman representing the naked vulnerability of the human species. Where is Hygeia? Medicine has turned its back on humanity. Medicine has turned its back on the river of life, on the threat of disease and death. And when Klimt presented this painting to the expectant leaders of the University of Vienna, they were horrified. And they were so horrified, they refused to display this painting in their university because it failed, in their view, to convey the great contribution that medicine was making to society. But Klimt was making a very important point, that although we know that science has the power to achieve great things, although we know that science and medicine has already achieved great things for our society, at this particular moment in history, at this particular turning point, when the dangers are so great, but the opportunities are within our grasp, this is the moment where medicine must not turn its back on humanity. And only we can make sure that that future doesn't come to pass. Thank you so much.